myself back down here. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Thrive interview series, Inner Resilience for Outer Growth, where every week I'm interviewing an amazing female entrepreneur and hearing more about her journey in terms of resilience, mindset, and abundance. Today's fabulous guest expert is LaTanya DuBois. And LaTanya, I'm super excited to have you here because I know some of your story, your work, and your journey. And I think like you just embody resilience in a super powerful way.
Well, thank you.
So on a professional level, LaTanya is the founder of Eagle Eye Management. And professionally, she has worked with starting out with health organizations, governments, and nonprofits. And from there, she went on to start her firm, Eagle Eye Management. And now she coaches a variety of businesses and still does work in the health and nonprofit areas. So that in of itself would be enough for most people. But I think, you know, what's really compelling, LaTanya, is also your personal story. So you started out as the child of a mom with an addiction issue. You were pregnant as a single mom, and then your son got a chronic health condition, or got diagnosed with a chronic health condition. So I really feel like you've kind of had these two major journeys, in your life. One was from your starting point, just like moving into what most people would consider, kind of like the normal career entry point. Like just that seems to me like one whole journey. And then there's your career journey, from being an employee to starting your own firm, and now being someone who has huge impact here locally and also speaks in many different venues around the country. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about this whole life journey that you've been on and really touch on some of the pieces around resilience and how your thinking had to change. Because I have to think back at the beginning, if I were in your shoes, I would just be thinking, man, I have been treated unfairly. I have been dealt a crappy hand and I'm struggling. And those are not the kind of thoughts that get you to the place you are now. So let me turn it over to you, and I'd love to hear more about what your journey has been like.
So, it started very young for me. Obviously, being a teenage mom was one of the factors that came from some of the stuff that I experienced. But you're correct. I had both parents actually were dealing with addiction issues. And the core of it was they were loving parents, right? They loved each other and they loved me, but life and some of their own mental health struggles and I wouldn't say struggles, challenges were presented well before I was born. So me coming into play probably exacerbated that whole thing. And now you have this young lady who is very vibrant and engaged, and my family embraced me with so much love. But with those challenges of addiction and mental health challenges as well, you can't do all the things that parents usually can do, right? So emotionally, they were not available for me because they had their own stuff that they were trying to move through. So right around the age of about 13, 14, was where I started experiencing the most depression and frustration and suicidal ideations, and really just felt hopeless for quite some time. So the first thing was I call him the one believer, right? I've always had a one believer who would kind of spend time with me. They didn't talk about what was happening in my home, but they did things to distract me from what life was dealing me, the cards I was getting. So right around that age, I came across a woman who lived across the hall from me. We lived in a tenement building, and she started the ball rolling for me to realize that life has other options. And she actually was just a crocheter. She would crochet doll dresses. And I would go over there and she would teach me that. She would make cookies. It was a much older woman. She was a sage for sure. And she spent time with me. And I realized that over the course of my years, I always had that one believer. So I ran away from home at 16 because I just couldn't take it anymore. Like, I had too many pressures between school and my mom's addiction, because my dad was in and out, but he was present to the whatever that meant at that time. But I did feel lonely. I did feel overwhelmed. I did feel frustrated. And I felt like even when I reached out for help, nobody would come help me. Like, I did not feel like there was support there. So even with that one believer, there was times where I was like, I wish somebody would just come take me out of this situation. And when nobody did, I ran off. And that's where my journey started at 16.
Yeah. And so how did you keep going versus just saying, I have been dealt a crappy hand and I'm just going to stop because it's all I can do just to cope with what's going on? I'm so curious about this because there are so many people who have been in a similar situation to you who didn't keep going, but there's something within you that kept you fired up and going. It is sort of the best way I can put it. But I'm curious, what do you feel like it's a quality you had, or just like your conditions changed? What made it different?
We all have it. I really believe we all have it. And here's why. No matter what we go through, we come out on the other side of it somehow. Whether we come out of it kind of beat up and bruised or not, we still come out of it somehow. And one of the activities I do with my clients, and we actually did it on your story when you was there, is dispelling the myths, right? And I think that was the key, was I always reminded myself that if you got through that, you're going to get through this. If you got through that, you're going to get through this. And I would not allow myself to feel, and until it became a mental health issue beyond my control, I really had to be motivated by the things I saw around me. So now as an adult, and when I coach people, I say it's important to have a lot of affirmations around you, a lot of positive people around you. Watch where you work, watch where you eat, watch where you, just be conscious, because you already have so many defeating language that you self-talk, right? So you got to have something to remind you that that's not true. And I think that was the key. Despite my mother's addiction, she was a huge advocate, a very intelligent woman. And watching her move through her recovery and be, 25, 27 years now, almost, clean from, free from use of any drugs, I was able to see that that part of you, that even though you may feel certain ways about yourself, you gotta remind yourself somehow that you're here. If you're here, then you have time to do more, to recover better. You have time. So that's what I think got me through those times.
I hear you. And LaTanya, after spending time with you, I got to say, you have sort of what I think of as like these two different styles of energy in you to a really high degree that most people don't have in the same package. So on the one hand, you just have like a ton of strength and grit and power. And on the other hand, you're full of love and compassion. And so I feel like I meet a lot of people who are, particularly women, who are like either super loving and helpful or super powerful, but it's rare, I think, to find someone who embodies both of those styles to the degree that you do.
Wow.
And so I love that. I love being around your energy. And I think I'm bringing that up just to come back and say, I do think you have some kind of grit superpower, some level of, continuing to move forward that not everyone sort of naturally has. So.
Wow. Well, I'll take it. Because I tell you guys before, some of this comes without me knowing. I know God plays a huge part in that, because sometimes I'll come out of a session and don't remember what I told you. And I'll say, I'm just a vessel to give you a message that you've been waiting to hear. But I think what's also important is, you have to have safe space. And my biggest message to a lot of business owners or just leaders like parents and people who are in a leadership capacity is you got to be gentle with yourself. You got to recognize that trauma has happened at some point, maybe for you. And in that sense, you don't have the wherewithal to just be out there putting all your business on Front Street to get it dealt with so you can do those great things you have set up for you to do in life. So it is a lot of work, and a lot of people don't like to do that work, but I think they don't like to do the work with the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you crack that egg open and people are vulnerable, you got to know how to continue to cultivate that. I can't just identify something in you that needs to be talked through and healed and then say, well, my time is up, see you next month, or never see you again. I have to have some kind of communication, and most people are not used to that. They're just used to being used or used to just paying for a lot of things and not getting that support to continue the healing process. So that's equally important to me.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that our inner growth is what helps to create our outer growth, because if we're not healing, if we're not growing on the inside, emotionally, spiritually, then we're really limited in the steps that we can take in the outer world. So we have to have that confidence and faith and self-trust on the inside in order to allow us to take the outer action. So let me rewind a little bit. What was it that led you, because you had what sounded like a great career working in nonprofits or different governmental groups, working on wellness and health. And so what led you to want to start your own company? Because often that's a place where a lot of people get stuck because it can feel like that's overwhelming or scary or risky. So I'd love to hear a little more about what you were thinking back at that time.
So just as a disclaimer, yes, it's all that. It's still just, it is very overwhelming, very scary, very risky, right? So that's first. But the need is greater than the fear. For me, the need was way greater. And, working in these different agencies and even being a recipient of services, I was on public assistance, I received welfare for food stamps and cash and rent assistance. I had experienced these things. And what I noticed is people just don't know how to treat folks that had trauma. They just work with them and they continue to pick at the sore, so to speak. So I usually use this scenario, and I hope it can put you in the mindset of where we are as a society. If I was beaten up, let's say somebody jumped me in the street and they beat me up really bad, you would physically see my bruises, right? And when you talk to me, you would be a little gentler, right? You would just be like, oh my gosh, she looks like she's in pain, because you see these gashes and stuff. But when someone goes through emotional abuse or some kind of emotional or mental abuse, they don't display those scars the same way. So imagine that person being bruised that way internally, coming in for a service or a need, and the leadership does not see that. They don't know how to see it. They don't have a temperature for how to read it when it's in the service delivery that they offer. So I saw that as the need, that our leadership does not have the qualification to do some of the work that they needed to do in their community. And on top of that, they didn't have some of the skill set. So it was a lot of capacity building. But then I realized that a lot of these leaders had their own trauma. And they did not resolve their own trauma, right? And we see that a lot. Like, I'm still going to have gifts and talents. So that's going to precede me because I'm here to do a job in this thing we call Earth, right? But on the other side of that, there's things that's happened to me that I have not healed. So I lash out and I do things that further promotes pain in others because I have no way of resolving that. So when I started my agency, it was really to help people keep their businesses afloat while they healed that stuff. So I saw them as two entities. You have a business that needs to be need some strategic, systematic development, operational development, but you have this person that can't get the motor running in that thing without the key, and the key is their healing. So that's what made me start moving towards, I need to help more people get that in order so they don't lose these great organizations that's doing work that's needed in their community, but they just don't know that they have to work on themselves first.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was a participant in an amazing and powerful retreat that you and Nancy Loeffler and Amy Lancy led, I think, about 2 springs ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to meet some of your clients who were all like really energized, young women who were looking to really bring their important work, the things that they do really well into the world. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about the kinds of things you help your clients with. So I heard that, part of it is around the inner healing that's going to allow them to keep moving and keep growing. What else on sort of a practical level do you end up working with your clients on?
Okay, so that's what you said initially about stepping out into your own business, how it can be risky and overwhelming. So as a business owner, when I started, I didn't have a lot of money. I basically, if you looked at my books right now and you look back at what I used to start my business, I spent maybe about $212 to get my business off the ground. That was my starting funding, right? $212. And I didn't know anything. I didn't understand anything. And I was looking and I was going to different workshops and conferences and, getting all of this information. But where I got stuck was the fact that I did not know what to do with it. Like what came first, what came second, what came third. And because I started feeling incompetent, and remember, I have that trauma mind going on, I started feeling unworthy. I started feeling unable to succeed at this business. So I didn't step out and get the support I needed to make this business move. So what I do with my clients is get them into action, because when I talk to people, they have all the information. Like if I say, okay, so you got to know your business structure. What services do you offer? What products have you been getting paid for? They have all those answers. And I'll be like, okay, so now what's holding you up? And they're like, well, I want to expand. I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, so I don't know. Because I've gone to this training about social media development. I've gone to this training about finances. I've gone to this conference for 3 days. I felt pumped up, came home with this big booklet. And then I sat down and said, now, what did they say to do with this booklet? So most of my clients is that person is overwhelmed with all of this knowledge. And when they come to me, we first figure out, well, what do you want to be in 90 days, 6 months, a year, whatever, in your business, but also where do you want to be in 90 days, 6 months, or a year in your life? Because those speak to each other every day when you're a business owner. So they identify those things, and then we operate, so to speak, to make those things happen so that the movement can happen in their business. Because it's one thing to know a lot, but it's a whole nother thing to do just as much with that information to get you off the ground. And it's scary. And sometimes you just need somebody there to say, it's okay, this is the scary part, but I'm here with you. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, for sure. So, in this year where we've had the pandemic, where we've had this just rising tide of awareness on the part of white people about the baked-in racial inequity in our culture, there have been these significant disruptions, and I'm a big believer that when the status quo changes, it opens up new possibilities, which is exciting. But then when the status quo changes, like that's also, I think everyone's apple cart got upset at some point during this year. So I'm just curious how you're helping your clients sort of recalibrate and maybe move. For some of them who may have an in-person business, they may need to move in a new direction. Others who are virtual may not so much. But I am just curious sort of how you're helping people in a very disruptive year.
So again, that goes back to the same model, right? So where are you first? Where are you? Let's talk about those things, because if you've experienced some racial inequality, or if you've experienced some type of discrimination, you have, and it's unresolved especially, this can be a distraction and not so much a true opportunity to pivot. And depending on who the client is and where they are in their journey of healing, we had to talk about that part. Like what about what's happening in the world right now affects you most? So I did have one cohort that felt like, this is a lot. And, I had that happen to me, and this is too much to keep watching, and I'm depressed and I can't stop watching the news. And we had to focus on that side and really flush through. So what's hurting? What's going on? And how does that affect your bottom line in your business? Are you unable to operate? Do you have a team that could pick up the weight while you figure this out or whatever? So that cohort had a different path that they would take. We would do a lot of that and seeing what in their business was able to continue to progress, like you said, whether it was virtually or not, and what parts of their business became stagnant. And then we looked at opportunities like grants and things to that nature to see how they can keep the funding coming in, because cash flow is king, right?
Right.
But then we had the other team of people who were like, okay, what are we going to do? Because I need to keep my money coming in. I got a family to take care of, and a lot of things is changing. I have somebody who actually owned a gym that was like, what can we do? And we went back to some of that fundamental stuff. Like, okay, so what was some of the things we discussed? Get comfortable being on video. This was all things tools that we have that we just had not plugged into. So what we would do is go back to that dispelling the myths practice and say, well, where in this list was things that you did for the first time that you shocked yourself? And a lot of them realized that they did do videos, that they did start recording some of their classes. They did start doing things that they just didn't use. So we were like, okay, so now we got to use them, right? We got to learn Zoom. Let's learn Microsoft Teams. Let's start using Facebook Live. Are you on LinkedIn? Can you connect with people that's on LinkedIn? Understanding what each social medium is about, because not everything is Facebook. So what does LinkedIn's purpose do? And what does Twitter's purpose do? So we really had to look at what do you have at your disposal right now that can be monetized to keep you afloat. So that's what that group did. But it was a lot of reiteration. It was like, so, okay, so when we were in our sessions, didn't we talk about this? And they're like, right, but that was like 6 months ago. I didn't think. I said, well, that's the whole thing about it, right? Sometimes you get tools before you need them. It's just a remembrance to go back to the toolkit and go, oh man, we never even used that. So, and then I just check in. Some people who graduated out of my programs, I check in with them and they regurgitate, like, what I taught during that time. And they'll say, I was listening, coach. I was paying attention, or they'll say, no, I remember you told me to do this form. So it really just depends on where they are mentally, mind, body, and soul is huge. So you can't pivot if you don't have your mindset right. And I think you teach that so well, Marcy. When we sat down and talked about mindset, that's the piece that a lot of people skip. You think you could just keep pushing forward, but at some point you're going to hit a brick wall because you don't understand how you're thinking. Right. So if you're already thinking you're not going to succeed, then nothing I say is going to make a difference. But if I can help you see how you're thinking, and that's where I would say, go see a Marcy, because a Marcy is a mindset coach. She's going to help you. What am I thinking about this situation? Then when you're ready to get into action, come see me, because I want you to go do it. So that's how I deal with them. You may not be ready to be with me so much. I'm going to send you to where you need to be so that you can get that part done. And then we can keep moving in a bigger development of your business.
Great. So time-wise, we're going to have to pause here, although we can keep going because I love talking with you and hearing your wisdom. So if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best way right now is I would suggest that you will follow me on Facebook. You can definitely, and I can put it in the group, you can definitely schedule some time with me through Calendly. to just talk. Let's just see where you are to see if you even need someone like me, right? Uh, it may not be me that's the person you need, but if I talk to you and find out where your needs are, I can send you to the right place, at least who I think you should start off the ball with. But scheduling some time with me through Calendly would be great. Following me on Facebook, you'll find me in the LaTanya DuBois, and we can talk there. My website has great links to connect with me as well, which is Eagle Eye Management LLC. I've also put that in the room for you guys. But that's the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay, great, great. Well, and as LaTanya said, if you find that you're having a mindset issue and you know that your thoughts are getting in the way of you taking the action you want, then I invite you to take the amazing quiz that I've developed. It's at marcystahl.com/quiz. And that will help you identify what beliefs are holding back your success.
Yes, that's huge.
All right. Thank you, LaTanya. I so appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. And everyone, I hope you'll join me next week for my last interview in this series with the amazing image consultant, Ginger Berg. And with that, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.